So let's get to the news. There's really nothing to talk about. Another really quiet morning here. There's been swift reaction on Capitol Hill to a pair of reports released by the Senate detailing Russia's efforts to influence American politics during the 2016 election and afterwards. Researchers dug through millions of social media posts created by a Russian-based firm called Internet Research Agency. The reports found that it was the agency's mission to help Donald Trump and hurt his opponent, Hillary Clinton, by spreading disinformation.
Well, of course, we knew most of that.
According to the reports, the agency spread messages aimed at suppressing turnout among Democratic voters, particularly among African Americans. Researchers counted more than 260 million engagements with the Russian firm's content on Facebook and Instagram alone.
Well, but, you know, so here's the thing. I mean, they do that in elections, right? So after the elections, Mika, I'm sure they just sort of packed up their bags and got on the, BOAC?
No.
Flew from
even
Miami
months
Beach.
after the election.
And it was over.
No. The Russian disinformation teams were still posting on social media.
Really? But who in the world would they target if not Hillary?
Well, they trained their sights on a new target. Special Counsel Robert Mueller.
Wow. Okay. So let's just, Willie Geist, I guess nothing should surprise us at this point. But the Russians are so in bed with Donald Trump, so to speak, that not only did they help him, they did everything they could do. Their spy agencies did everything they could do. The GRU did everything they could do. The ex-KGB agent that runs the country did everything they could do to help the Republicans win in 2016. But that wasn't enough. Now we find out that they were focusing their efforts on Robert Mueller, who's conducting investigation into Russia, who's working for the Justice Department.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. We should point out this report was ordered by the Republican-led Senate Intel Committee, led by Richard Burr of North Carolina, the Republican there. But yeah, Joe, everything we knew before we saw this report yesterday, was that Russia helped Donald Trump get elected because they believed his policies would be better for Russia, that they liked him better than Hillary Clinton. But now he's already in the White House, and Russia is continuing to work on Donald Trump's behalf, going after Robert Mueller, posting across Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, different posts that go after Robert Mueller and criticize him and try to undermine the investigation that they know he's undertaking. Very interesting, Matt Miller. Why would Russia, after Donald Trump is already in the White House, what is the interest of Russian operatives? What is the interest of Vladimir Putin in continuing to elevate and promote Donald Trump and to take down Robert Mueller?
Well, they spent a lot of money and made a lot of effort to get their guy there, and I think they want to keep him there. I think you hit on what I thought was the most important thing in this report. It's not just that the Russians, tried to interfere with the election to get Donald Trump elected. We knew that. We've known that for a long time. It's that their messages largely echo what the president says. We see them trying to suppress the African-American vote, something the president's now campaign manager, the person Brad Parscale, who handled his online engagement during the 2016 campaign, bragged about doing it. We see them echoing the president's messages, attacking the FBI, attacking the Justice Department, trying to undermine Bob Mueller. And I think what it shows is that, the president kind of sets the tone here, and you see the tone that he sets being carried out not just by his supporters here, but by his online army, which we now know is a Russian-paid, Russian-financed, Russian-directed effort, to really undermine American confidence in democracy, undermine American confidence in institutions, and ultimately weaken the special counsel.
And, John Meacham, this just underlines what the president's own cabinet said in that extraordinary press conference several months ago, where you had the FBI director and even the president's secretary for Department of Homeland Security saying that American democracy was under threat. Well, we thought they were just talking about while elections were being held. This is obviously a 24/7 mission by Russian spy agency to undermine American democracy.
And I hate to put it like this, but like all great enemies, like all great foes, they have found a way to make our greatest strength our greatest weakness, which is our essential openness in a technological and digital sense. They are taking advantage of the American ethos of free expression to conduct a concentrated propaganda campaign on behalf of a particular person and that particular person's political agenda. And I don't know how many times we've sat and said this, but we'll say it one more time and keep doing it. The failure of those who reflexively support the president to credit this kind of information, this kind of investigation, and to allow it to then shape their view of that president and that program is one of the mysteries of the age. And it can change quickly. It changed with Joe McCarthy. It changed with Watergate. But it hasn't changed yet. And I just think the more information like this, the more hard data, the more we're going to have to figure out why 38 to 40% of the country refuses to see what is so obvious to everyone else.
And the compliant Congress, especially the compliant members of the House. Our founders could have never imagined that a foreign power would pose such a direct threat to American democracy, as President Trump's own intel chiefs and Director of Homeland Security said they did. And yet you have Republicans in Congress who are compliant, who not only ignore the attacks from Russia, but actually double down on the attacks from Russia. What these Russians were saying about Robert Mueller, you had a lot of members in the House of Representatives saying the same exact thing. And I want to go to Matt Miller for a second. Matt, while democracy is under attack, we have the New York Times reporting that social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, ignored one warning sign after another, failed to take one curative step after another, and basically allowed this to continue because they were making money off of a system that actually, as Madeleine Albright and some people that we were with at DNI a couple of weeks ago said, have turned technology into a hopeful development for democracy, into actually a threat.
Yes.
You know, we have not gotten anywhere close as a society to figuring out how to deal with this threat. The social media companies clearly haven't yet gotten their arms around it. They've invested a bunch of new resources. Facebook, brags to the press all the time about, the war room it's set up to kind of monitor this activity going forward. But it's not clear yet that they have a real handle on it. And I don't think we'll really know until the next presidential election when we see the Russian online army out in force again, trying to reelect the president that they supported the first time. But I think, even aside from the social media companies, there is a responsibility for our leaders and for our institutions. As you said, Republicans in Congress really have to stand up and say, look, we have differences of opinion here. We support Donald Trump. Others may not. But we all together reject interference by a foreign power. We all together reject people spreading lies and spreading conspiracy theories. The problem is it's hard for Republicans to say that when you have the leader of their party setting the opposite tone day in and day out over and over again.
And Joe, I would submit, and I'd defer to Professor Meacham on this, but I would submit we've never known a moment in American history like the moment that we are living through right now. And it entails a president of the United States who takes the field nearly every day with the intent to sow chaos and disruption and division within our political system. That works hand in glove with what Vladimir Putin is set out to do to this country, to sow division, chaos, and unrest within our society and our political system. And for the first time, I think in my memory, and I don't know about anybody else's memory, we have an entire political party standing by the sidelines, basically cheering this behavior on. I don't think it's ever occurred before. It's highly dangerous. And again, to your point that you just raised, where are the Republicans? I mean, former Director Comey spoke to this yesterday. Where are they in this pivotal moment in history?
And amazing.
Elise, I mean, I don't know whether you agree with me or not, but I have never, ever, ever on a daily basis seen a country so immune to the terror, to the treasonous behavior that is going on right within us.
It's quite the
Yes.
contrast from 10 years ago when Republican orthodoxy was strong foreign policy, the Democrats are weak, the uber hawks of the party, and now you have this stunning evidence of intervention in our election, and just blatantly the Russians are trying to sow discord. They are trying to just make worse the racial wounds within this country. They're trying to suppress the vote. And you have Republicans who are silent and seemingly okay with this kind of attack on our democracy.
Well, not only silent, as James Comey said yesterday, they actually went on the attack. As we've said before, you can actually look at what Vladimir Putin's goals are, what the ex-KGB agents' goals are, what the GRU's goals are, what the Russian military's goals are. And you actually have Republicans in the House doing his bidding. It wasn't just Dana Rohrabacher, Mika.
Yeah.
James Comey said it so well yesterday after that hearing that not only are they not asking the tough questions about how to stop meddling from the Russians, they are trying actively to undermine an investigation that is supposed to uncover that interference. They don't want it uncovered, apparently, because there are a lot of Republicans that understand that the game was rigged, but it was rigged for them by the Russians.
And that complicity is the cancer potentially inside our democracy.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.